Homemade egg noodles are a staple in Appalachian country cooking. They are very easy to make, don't require a lot of ingredients, and are very filling. There are a lot of dishes like this in our culture. Things like biscuits, beans, and cornbread. Most came from necessity to feed families cheaply during hard times, and many stayed with us throughout the generations. Here are the ingredients, but don't worry, I'll include a link below for a full written recipe and tutorial. First, you'll need 1 egg, which is 50 grams. Put this in 1 cup of flour, or 150 grams. And to this, you're just going to stir it. Once you get it stirred up as much as you can, you're going to start adding in water. The water will be dependent on how much flour you use. Everybody that measures a cup of flour is slightly different, so I'm going to give you a general guideline. What you'll want to do is add between 2 to 4 tablespoons of water. That's 30 to 60 milliliters. It's not a precise science. You're basically looking for a really stiff dough. What I like to do is add 1.5 teaspoons of water at a time. That way I don't put too much water in. However, if you do get the dough a little bit too wet, all you have to do is throw in a little more flour. So it's not a hard recipe at all. In this video, I am using a bowl and the back of a spoon. I like to do this to get dough together a lot of times, but you can also use a mixer for this, or a food processor, or you can just put it straight on the counter and make a well, put the wet ingredients in the center and stir it together. I really like this recipe because it teaches you the foundations on how to make dough in general. This is really good at learning how to make bread, for instance, or how to make pastries such as pie dough or puff pastry. Egg noodles are really a great way to learn how to start cooking in the kitchen. I know it seems like a simple recipe, but once you learn how to do this, you'll be surprised how many complicated dishes start out the exact same way. Getting together a nice dough, learning how to work with it, learning the feel for the texture, and how, in general, that if you add just a little bit more water, you get a sticky dough. If you add too little water, you have a very dry dough. Now, as you can see, it's still like kind of lumpy, but if I squeeze it together, it holds, similar to like when you're playing with wet sand. That's the consistency you are looking for. Now, all I'm doing right here is I'm just gathering up all the bits from the sides of the bowl. If you don't have the ability to do this and it's just dry and crumbly, you'll want to add just a little bit more water, like a teaspoon at a time at this point. Likewise, if the dough is too sticky, this would be the point you would add a little more flour. Now, as you can see, it is sticking to my hands right now. It isn't too sticky. Wait a little bit before you add flour to the dough because it might come out completely fine. And if not, you can always add flour at the end. What I suggest is gather everything up, get as much as you can out of the bowl, and then we're going to start kneading it. Once after we knead it for a few moments, if it is still really sticky, then we'll add a little bit of flour. Now, there are recipes out there that don't have you knead this at all. The reason why we knead it is because if you don't, when you start to boil them, they can turn really mushy and it'll have a consistency of like really bad dumplings. And if you've ever had bad dumplings, you know what I'm talking about. They're gluey, they stick together, they're just really unpleasant to eat. And then they kind of make your stomach hurt because you just ate too many, trying to be polite to the person who gave them to you. The kneading basically builds up a little bit of gluten, gives a nice firm bite to the noodle, and it just makes them easier to cook and work with when you are rolling them out. And as you can see, it's no longer sticking to my hands, and it's pretty firm dough. That's all you need to do. Your next step is going to be rolling out the dough. Here you want to have a little bit of extra flour. About 1 to 2 teaspoons is all you're going to need, which is about 3 to 6 grams. You're going to sprinkle it lightly on your work surface and sprinkle a little bit lightly on your dough. The whole purpose of this is to help you roll it out without it sticking too much to your rolling pin. Now, if you find that it's really sticking to your rolling pin, add a little more flour. As you can see, it's sticking a little bit to mine, but it doesn't stick when I try to pull it off, so it's not needing any more flour at this point. I may need some in the future. I really am not a really great person to use a rolling pin, so don't judge me on this. One thing I will tell you, for many years I never had a rolling pin, and what I used was a pickle jar. If you don't have a rolling pin, something with a smooth side like a smooth glass jar or even a drinking glass, plastic, as long as it's round and cylindrical, you can use it as a rolling pin. So don't go out and buy a rolling pin for this. Use a cup. Again, as you can see, it's starting to stick a little bit. So what I like to do is just peel it off. If it's going to stick too much more, I'll add a little bit more flour. And if you noticed, I'm turning the dough every once in a while and flipping it. The reason why I do this is basically to keep it from sticking to the counter and also to let the gluten relax. And if you notice, it sometimes shrinks back. That's what I mean when I say gluten relax. It basically makes it really nice and supple dough, and it makes it easy to roll out later. Cut out later, I meant to say, sorry. As you noticed, I put a little more flour on because at this point, the more you roll it out, if it's already sticking, it's going to stick more. And the reason for this is because you're basically flattening out the dough and you're getting the water content to the surface. I just really enjoy making egg noodles. They just remind me of my grandma so much because this is another one of her favorite dishes to make. They are so simple, they're easy to learn. I probably learned these when I was maybe 9, 10 years old, so they're great to teach to your family if you really want to teach them how to cook. Now I'm basically showing you here, I rolled this out to about 1/8 of an inch thick, give or take. Once you get it to that thickness, you can now begin cutting out your dough. I like to go about 1/4 inch wide and just make strips. Long time ago, I used to use a knife and it took ages. And one day I was visiting a future in-law and found out he was making these and he was using a pizza cutter. My mind was blown how quickly he was cutting these. And I was like, whoever taught you? And he goes, I don't know, who doesn't cut them with a pizza cutter? So ever since then, I've used a pizza cutter. It literally cuts so quickly. It takes so much less effort than using a knife. It cuts your time down by about a half an hour because cutting with a knife on these can be a little tedious. So get you a pizza cutter and you will thank me. And you'll be going, oh my gosh, why haven't I used a pizza cutter to cut other kinds of dough? So now all you do is just cut them roughly down the middle. I'm looking for about 4, 6 inches tops. It doesn't have to be precise. Just remember when you cook these up, they roughly double in size and thickness. They don't get too much longer. So after you do that, you just sprinkle a little more flour on top and then you're going to just break them apart if any of them didn't get cut. The only reason you put the flour on top right now is it just helps them keep from sticking when you put them in the water. Now, if you want to freeze these freeze absolutely beautiful. All you'll do is just leave them on the counter after you get them separated. Toss a little more flour on them to help dry them out. Let them sit there about a half an hour, and then toss them in a freezer bag, freezer safe container, and store them up to about 6 months. After that, they get freezer burn and they taste gross. Throw them out. Don't try to eat them. Trust me on this. The next thing you want to do is have about 3 quarts of stock. You can use just plain water, bouillon, you can use chicken breast, whatever you like. You can even use vegetable soup. And you just want to get it to a nice rolling boil. Turn it down to a simmer. Put in the noodles. If you don't feel comfortable using your hands, please use a ladle because boiling water, of course, will burn the tar out of you and you do not want to get a burn from boiling water, trust me. Once you get them in there, you're going to turn it back up to medium high. Do not stir these until you see a rolling boil. You can stir them gently after that, but if you stir them before then, you can actually break apart the noodles because they're so tender. You want to cook these anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. 10 will give you a slightly underdone texture, and 20 will give you the traditional country noodle texture where they're translucent in the middle when you cook them open. And it will give you a full appreciation on how the Appalachians tend to eat. So if you want to go old school, do the 20 minutes and try it out. You may or may not like it. So I suggest if you like an al dente noodle, test them about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And this is what they look like. They're nice, great noodle to put into a crock pot and cook them all day with some chicken breast or chicken thighs, whole chicken. And as you can see, they're very flexible. And I'll cut one open so you can see what they look like. You will see that they are translucent on the inside if they're cooked all the way through. And look at that, they're cooked through. Thank goodness, because that would have been embarrassing. Please visit us at jacksonsjob.com for more recipes, including this one. I hope you enjoyed watching how to make homemade egg noodles. Have a great day. Happy baking. Enjoy.